This conference will now be recorded.
To remind everyone, when we do our moment of silence at the beginning of the council meeting, I'd just like to ask that you remember Avery Hotchkins in your thoughts and prayers. Ms. Hotchkins was a volunteer for our department that came to us through our relationship with the Johnson County Community College. By all accounts, she was a motivated and passionate individual who was excited to be a part of the Edwardsville Fire Department family. Chief Whittem, please pass along our condolences of myself and the city council to our fire crews and her family. If there's anything our city can do to honor her memory, please let us know. Please rise for the pledge. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The first item on the agenda is consider approval of the consent agenda items.
Madam Mayor, I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
We have a motion and second. Will the clerk please call roll?
Malott,
Yes.
Shriver,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Adams,
Abstain.
Bishop.
Yes.
Next, we have requests or comments from the public. Okay, none tonight. Item 3 is consider mayoral appointments for the following citizen advisory boards. Tonight we're looking at the CPPS board.
Mayor Cahar, member of council, this is the final board appointment that we need to make to set the roster for our CPPS board. Our planning commission's already set as well. Michelle Parker is the applicant for this position. She would be filling the position vacated by Mr. Pisani on the board. Ms. Parker is here tonight. If you have any questions from her, I believe her application materials are included in the packet. Or if her appointment were to be approved, it would run to February of 2025, a full 3-year regular appointment.
Okay, and Ms. Parker is here this evening just to let the council know. She, of course, is a citizen community member here in Edwardsville. She's also an accountant by trade, so has a lot of fiscal background, can bring that to the table for the CPPS board, and is really excited in making Edwardsville a great place to live for our community members and visit for folks coming in.
Madam Mayor, I make a motion that we approve the appointment of Michelle Parker to the CPPS board.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Will the clerk please call roll?
Malat,
Yes.
Shriver,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Adams,
Yes.
Bishop.
Yes.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is item number 5, consider a motion to recess into executive session
Oh, We got
pursuant to.
one more
Mayor
before.
appointment first.
Sorry. Moving right along. Oh, gosh, sorry, guys. Consider mayoral appointment of municipal court judge. Zach, will you take that one?
Sure, just to run through this item, this is another mayoral appointment done at the consent of the council. As many of you know, our previous judge, Judge Wetzler, announced his retirement, so he was phasing out towards the end of last year. Our mayor, or excuse me, our judge pro tem, who was appointed by that same process, was Dave Duckers, who used to serve in the capacity of city attorney here for us. He also has a number of other positions and roles that he served in Wyandotte County, which are detailed in the agenda memo. The staff recommendation, as well as the mayoral recommendation for the appointment for the permanent judge, is to move Mr. Duckers from the pro tem position to the permanent judge position. With that action, we will have a vacant pro tem judge position that we'll consider at a later date, and we're looking at some different candidates, so that'll come up later. But Mr. Duckers came very well recommended by all the court staff and police department, likes working with them. If you have any other questions about Mr. Duckers, I take that now. Most of you know him already.
Mayor, make a motion to approve the city council mayor appointment of David Duckers as a municipal court judge for the city of Edwardsville. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Will the clerk please call roll?
Malat,
Yes.
Shriver,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Adams,
Yes.
Bishop.
Yes.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to 5. Consider a motion to recess and do executive session pursuant to KSA 75-4319B2 for consultation with legal counsel, which would be deemed privileged in the attorney-client relationship as it relates to the development agreement involving Kincaid project.
Make the motion.
And I believe, Mike, did you
Yeah.
say about 20 minutes on that?
I think you probably need that long. Yeah, for this one. And we will, just as I referenced to the mayor, so we'll have to, once we finish that item, we'll come back out and then we'll have to have a different motion for the second executive session because there were different topic matters. So, 20 should, I would,
625.
25 should be sufficient.
I'll make the motion to recess for till 6:25 in executive session.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Will the clerk please call roll?
Malat,
Yes.
Shriver,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Adams,
Yes.
Bishop.
Yes.
I'm wondering if that might time out. Alexa's like, I'm not watching basketball. Sit down. I'm like, yeah, you are. It's just this one time now, baby, you may be making more money than you. That's right.
This conference will now be recorded.
We're only on the west side. That's the only side that matters. Yeah. That was it. It was like how many total we lost that day. They were losing that many every single day.
You had stole last week.
Yeah, tomorrow. I was changing over. It does.
You have time before we get to 7 or before we get.
Yeah, I just didn't understand what you were trying to say.
It's just the 4-1
Yeah. Let me know.
We're pretty much open whenever. At that. I think the docks, Ben, is the dock here on March? Ben?
What? He's supposed to be here on the 7th, and we're talking about rearranging.
I was saying.
Yeah, he knows. He knows. He was supposed to get back to me yesterday.
Oh, no, never.
He's actually talking about coming on
Oh,
Monday.
there it is.
Tuesday.
Don't jinx yourself.
I make a motion to return to a regular session.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Will the clerk please call roll?
Malat,
Yes.
Shriver,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Adams,
Yes.
Bishop.
There's no action required in that meeting. Make a motion, we go into executive session for.
KSA
Acquisition.
75-4319B6 for preliminary discussion of the acquisition of real property in the city's industrial park.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Will the clerk please call roll?
Malat,
Yes.
Shriver,
Yes.
Scott, Adams, Bishop.
Thank you.
This conference will now be recorded.
Move to return to regular session. No action necessary.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Will the clerk please call roll?
Who made the second? I'm sorry.
Garrett.
I made the motion.
Oh.
Second.
Gotcha. Malat,
Yes.
Shriver,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Adams,
Yes.
Bishop.
Yes.
All right, item number 7 on the agenda, consideration of 2022 update to the Wyandotte County Emergency Operations Plan and take necessary actions.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for giving us a few minutes. We appreciate it. I'm Matt May. I'm the Director of Emergency Management for Wyandotte County, and we wanted to present to you for consideration for adoption our newest version, variant, whatever we want to call it, of the County Emergency Operations Plan. Typically for us, this is a document that we review and do a major rewrite on every 5 years. We're a little early this time because the state decided to grace us with a new set of planning standards. And the feds actually gave us some things that we've been looking for about 10 years. So we incorporated some of those as well. What I want to do tonight is simply show you some examples. This is a very large document, as you can see. And if we want to ask questions about anything specific, please do that. With me is Susan McMahon. She's actually the person who put this together. So her fingers are a little bit shorter than they were about a year ago. So I'm banging the keyboard. What I wanted to show you is how we're going to give this document to you, in that we're going to give it to you electronically as well. And it will have the track changes turned on. So if you're really curious about exactly what words came out, went in, all you have to do is change the review setting to turn the track changes on. Otherwise, it's a lot easier to read if you really want to read it in with the track changes turned off. Let me go through a couple of the things that are probably significant, what I would consider to be significant changes. Most of them are in the base plan, which is what you're looking at here. There are references to Edwardsville, many of them actually, but this is just one of the demographic references in the very beginning of the base plan. That's probably the best document or piece of this document to look at, to go through, to familiarize yourself with, because then after that, there are 15 subsections we refer to as ESFs, or emergency support functions. These are groups of organizations or individuals or disciplines, if you will, that are usually working together for a common goal. So just for example, I won't go through all 15, but ESF 1 is transportation. So there are lots of folks involved in that, everything from DOT to bus lines to school bus transportation, people like that. ESF 2 is communications. We do a lot with that in my office because we also manage the county's radio system for public safety. ESF 3 is public works. That has a lot of breadth to it. And that one, so it has a lot of people it touches. ESF 4 is fire suppression. One of the unique things about this, the way this system is set up, is that fires actually has 3 pieces to it. And because in some parts of the country, not everybody does it the way we do it. So 4, which is fire suppression, 9, which is search and rescue, and 10, which is hazardous materials, typically in the Midwest, those are all done by the fire department. But as Chief Whitson can tell you, that's not always true in other parts of the country. And so the federal standard has them broken out separately. We treat them as one group. So that, but they're in there listed separately. ESF 5 is emergency management. That's the one that had some of the more significant changes for this time around, mostly to try and standardize some things that we've already been doing for a long time. So things that make more sense in an EOC or in the operations center, and how we structure ourselves and how we call ourselves, so that when you call up and say, I need to talk to the operations chief, chief in operations is a field designation. You ask for the operations coordinator, that's somebody sitting in my EOC. So, and that can be your EOC. So all those labels mean something, so you don't have to know the name of the person, you just know what their role is. And so we try to standardize those at the federal level. We got a lot of that done. One thing that they threw me for a loop on is we standardized how we rate the event. So nominal for us was 4 before, and now it's a 1. I always get them backwards. Yeah, page 33. So, so that's just an example of, really doesn't matter which way you do it. What really matters more is that we do it all the same way, so that when I talk to Johnson County and say, hey, I'm at level 3, their level 3 and my level 3 mean the same thing. So we understand each other. And again, that's what a lot of these standards are all about. Let's see if you can get there. If you will scroll back, Zach, just a little bit, and we'll, yeah, this table is probably valuable to look at. So one of the first things almost everybody asks us is, what do you decide to work on? How do you judge the standards for what's in here? And what events do you concern yourself with? This is a list that comes out of our hazard mitigation plan, another humongous document when it gets done. But from that, we gain, basically gets cooked down to 1 page. We use a numeric value for the different kinds of events. Some of that has to do with how much notice do we get. Tornadoes, obviously, we don't get a lot of notice on. Ice storms, we get a little bit more notice on. Forecasting's pretty good there, things like that. So all that gets factored in. Probability, magnitude, how much warning time we get. How long can they last? We know ice storms, if you were around in 2002, you know they can last a very long time as far as the impacts are concerned. And so that's one of the reasons of floods, windstorms, utility infrastructure failure, that includes those ice storm failures. Those are always things that we put at the top of the list because they have the biggest impact long term. So short of boring you to tears to go through all of this, you will have electronic copies at your leisure. You are more than welcome to ask me questions now, and I'll do my best to, between the projection system and the book in front of me, we'll find you the answers, or at least tell you what our thought pattern was when we got to it. This doesn't have a whole lot of detail in it, believe it or not, because every event is different. So what we say is, here's the goals or the outcomes we want to see. We want to see people put back into proper housing sooner. We want to see debris management done faster. Those are the kind of things we talk about in this book, as opposed to, this is how we're going to take a grappler and pick it up and put it in the truck, and the truck's going to get hauled off. So, and you can see that's just how we rank those. but we try to consider all hazards. We talk about doing an all hazards plan so that we aren't, and it turns out most things boil down to three things: either get up, get out, or get down. And we teach that at schools and when I'm doing public presentations. So what else you want to look at there, Susie? Oh, here's the order. Thank you, because I can never remember. So level 4 is monitoring now. It used to be level 1. Level 2 is usually what it means is that just staff from my office is in the office. So we're weather watches, things like that. Level 3 is, or level 2, excuse me, now is where we are partially activated. So for example, COVID response, we've been in a state of emergency for over 2 years now. It's been a long time. It's unprecedented. Nowhere in our history of emergency management as an industry have we ever done this before. But we went to a level 3 initially because we were in support of public health. It wasn't our event. We weren't managing it. We never really managed it. But we are supporting what they were trying to accomplish. And we're still doing that today. So that continues on and probably will continue on until at least April. So we'll be doing that for a little bit yet. And then level 1, that's where it's come y'all. That room full of people, we get people talking to each other, we get them working on common problems, again, in these 15 groups. And that's how the room is physically set up. But we can make it be whatever we need it to be. And we're constantly trying to improve that. In fact, this week, we had a new audio system put in so that we can have everybody in that room, some 35 or 40 people, actually all participate in a virtual event. We didn't have that capability. So we can put 5 or 10 on it at a time, but now we can put everybody in the room. Questions, thoughts, concerns?
Matt, you might just briefly, because I think it'd be valuable, is to explain the relationship. So emergency management's this county type function.
It is.
With the 3 cities and where kind of where they can, we have our emergency manager, which is the fire department, the fire chief, right? He's kind of our lead, but it depends on events again, but our public safety are probably our key people. But can you just briefly just kind of, this is how we're set up and then this is how it relates to the cities and what we do in support of the cities or the cities in support of the emergency management.
Okay, very good. And different parts of the country again are different, right? So in the state of Kansas, statutorily speaking, emergency management stops at the county level. It's the highest elected official on paper. In this county, there's a resolution that passes that down to me in my role and then my staff to support the other functions. We're always in support. We're kind of in the top of that stack, but we're not the very top. You'll notice who's at the very top. I feel strongly about this one. Community is always the last word, right? So, and then from there, we have a policy group, and that can be city commission, that could be county board of county commissioners. That also usually includes their legal assistants and what I call the entourage that comes with that. And then below that, you have some individual things like public affairs. And then the 4 across the top of the lower half of the chart is what I affectionately refer to by its acronym, which is the FLOP. So it's finance, logistics, operations, and planning. And that's where we had to standardize some things recently. Everybody was kind of using something that looked like this, and now we have a standard plan for how we do it. And then within that, there's all sorts of subdivision you can do. The relationship between the cities and the counties, if you guys in Edwardsville needed the county EOC fired up, it's one phone call to dispatch. We always have a duty officer on duty 24/7. Today, this week, it's Susan. Another week, it'll be me. Another week, it'll be Daniel. We have people in our office who rotate that through on a Monday morning to Monday morning basis. And then we have a mirror within the county administration, or we can mirror up with whoever you'd like to have us mirror up with over here at the city. So we're here for you. You're as much a part of who we support as anybody else. And we're able to bring those resources to bear. Does that get you where we're going?
No, I think
Okay.
that helps understand.
And so if something happens in Edwardsville on this policy group where it says Board of County Commission or City Commission,
Mhm.
if something happens in our city, am I right at assuming that we are the deciding factor board, not the county commission?
Well, it depends on where you're looking for resources, because we work kind of hand in hand. And so if you got the resources already and all you need from me is maybe a emergency declaration help so that we can get that to the state, I can certainly help you do that, and we'll be happy to help you do that. And that really doesn't require, I make my leadership at the county level aware of it, but for the most part, it's game on. If you need resources from the county, it's a one-stop shopping, right? So you come to me and say, hey, we got this and this and this covered, but man, we could use about 20 more dump trucks for debris removal. No problem, we'll get that set up. And we do the same thing across the jurisdictions too.
Chief Whittam, did you?
Perfect example, Ms. Khar, would be, we have a windstorm event that only takes out part of our county. All right, we sit there and definitely call Mr. May first. I have this issue, X, Y, Z. I am trying to get a hold of the city manager and into you for declaration for emergency government operations. And that is part of the parameters of your job as mayor to decide city council. You can do that via Zoom call, via phone call, or anything else. Then right back down and then I'll route the information to Mr. May exactly that we've prepared the disaster has reached the capacity of our resources of the city of Edwardsville. And then it's his responsibility to sit there and say, well, what resources do you need, chief? And then, like he said, it's piecemeal. He's going to go through this resource book and start sending us what we need. Now, we've had the snowstorm, the tornado.
Probably the biggest one, 19. Yeah.
19 affected the whole county. So the whole UG signed for the disaster declaration for presidential declared disaster. We were part of the county as a whole because we had widespread damage from Bonner Springs to Edwardsville into Kansas.
Absolutely.
But if we had a specific event like a microburst just hit here, it still kind of falls back on your powers as mayor and council to declare the local emergency. And then by charter and by the Constitution of the way emergency management is set up, the most statutes are set up, at the county level, we convey it to him, he takes it to the governor, and the governor's responsibility to take it on to the president. And that's how a lot of those declarations still rest into it. So if we had a specific issue here, you, the city manager, myself, the police chief, and all of us, resource here, are the focal point for the city of Edwardsville, and then we relay those petitions and concerns and the needs to Mr. May at the county level. So we still have control of our local emergency here. It's when we have a broader one that impacts more than 3 communities, that the UG and the county are going to do it as a whole for everyone.
Yeah, and I think the storm in 19 is a good example. We were in contact, we were having conversation, and once it had came within a quarter mile and scared the daylights out of me, and we gathered our wits and decided we need to do damage assessment. We did that not just for the UG, we did it for everything west of 435 because we were pretty sure that the damage stopped kind of right there, just based on reports from the field. And so when we set up for our damage assessment the next morning, we included you folks. We let you know we were doing it, but we didn't even ask for any resources. We just picked up and went because we knew everybody was going to need that information back. And we did it in real time. We have it set up so you can look at a link. It'll take you to a GIS map and you can watch in real time as that gets done and populated. So, and that includes pictures. You can kind of see it. You're familiar with the heat map, right? Where it starts putting color as more and more sites get looked at. It'll start to show you where the issues were. We figured out pretty quickly where they were and where they weren't. We redirected our resources to start looking to the south more. And we were able to get it all done in 24 hours, which is pretty quick.
A lot of it has really to do with reimbursements of costs through the federal level, right? So we can't just go make and say, hey, we had this damage, send us a check for our damage, right? There's a very formal structure that goes through this process. I mean, it's really what FEMA was originally designed around doing, right? Emergency management agency. And as some of you all know, my undergraduate degree was in this particular field. I didn't pursue it as a career, but I mean, it's about funding reimbursement, right? I mean, so we have to say, hey, we've had an event, the county does it, like you say, it goes to the governor, goes to the president. I mean, if it's not presidentially declared, you're not going to get federal funding. You could have a state disaster and you might get state funding. I don't know if there's a county disaster, fun, but I mean, but it's those kind of things. So a lot of it has to do in reimbursements. So I mean, if there's trees down on the road, what are we gonna do? We're gonna go get the trees out of the road. I mean, right? It's how big is it? And, you know, do we have enough resources? It's one tree down on the road and we can take Public Works and a couple of firemen and get it out of the road, even though it may be a big tree. And we may call and they say, hey, can we get help with the dump truck? And it may never rise to the level of an emergency management or disaster level because it's something that happened locally. But sometimes you don't know. I remember the ice event, you know, just what we've learned is you want to document because it all get, you know, because it's sometimes a year later and they say, oh, by the way, do you have a copy of da da da? Talked about inventory before, right? What's your road maintenance plan? You know, we want to say, have you ever maintained this section of road? When's the last time you asphalt it was last, you know? And if you can't prove it, then I go, well, you know, sorry, we don't know if that road wasn't that way before the event. So we're not going to pay for it after the event.
And we're currently under an agreement from 2018. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. It's essentially the same plan that he proposed tonight, other than the modified changes. Again, it's a standard plan when I briefed on it. It details the Emergency Powers Act. If you were to get into the thickness of the package, it's going to explain, you know, still the emergency declaration, local government still has control of everything. It just relaxes some of the finance requirements that you have to waive some of the procurement resolution. It establishes the predetermined established contract for dump trucks, bulldozers, everything else. And like I said, in 19, we actually had a federally declared disaster from that tornado. And we, I think we're somewhere around $79,000, $80,000 worth of reimbursement that we had worked on throughout the process. So usually when the event happens, I start putting everything together, start tracking time, not just us. I can reach out to both the chiefs and the public works director. We had to do on last time. Put that together back in and send it up there. Overall, I think the county took a couple $1 million. It was a
Yeah,
large term.
Yeah, I want to say more like 3.5.
And
So,
what-
I mean, you know, it just works that way. So you don't lose control of your city by signing it. There's
No.
nothing in there that says Mr. May comes in and declare martial law.
You tell me you don't want us here? Fine, that's fine. That's your call.
But you're, Chief, I'm sorry, Chief, you're still would be the incident commander if something happened in our city, even if we're reaching out to unified government?
Depends upon some factors to it. Okay, if it's a very large scale situation, let's say we had a tornado touchdown right across from our town, right in the KCK, we would probably join into a unified command.
Mhm.
So we could allocate resources out to
Yep.
a larger area of work. If it is still just pertaining to the city alone, the first part of it, yes, sir. But I could also break it down into smaller sections to manage it, where I could sit back and take bird's eye view at the higher level, which is essentially what an emergency manager does at EOC and sends the field commanders out to run smaller situations.
Perfect.
That's correct.
Would you remind me of the steps you said we could take to see the changes from the 2018 to this one?
If, Zach, if you will show up at the top in the ribbon, about the third one over from the left, it says review. You'll click on that and then over to the right just a little bit. See where it's in simple markup? If you click that down arrow, one of the things you can do is do all markup, or you can do no markup. If you do all markup, it looks a lot like this. So especially in the base plan, because we made a fair amount of changes are in the base plan, but it's also very difficult to read that way. So if you look at something and go, this doesn't sound like what last time I saw it, then click on that. You can read through and figure out what we took out, what we put in.
So all markups, the way to do that?
Yeah.
So,
And so
go
once we get Edwardsville and Bonner, and we already have the county signed off on this, then what we'll do is we'll publish a version that has all these changes accepted, but we want to give you guys a chance to see what those changes look like before we accept.
and that's what I was going to request if possible before we adopt the resolution. If the council might have the opportunity between now and the next meeting to review, it looks like 97 pages total, that we'd have that opportunity to review those changes before adopting the entire document.
And just know that somebody from the city was invited. We break it up in these 15 subgroups, right? And we spread that out over a year's time. And so we're meeting roughly once a month. And then we invite somebody from every jurisdiction and from every discipline in that particular ESF. So again, if you look at the ESF 1, it's transportation. We're going to invite street crews. We're going to invite those folks. So I may not invite you, but I'm probably going to invite somebody from staff.
Yeah.
And Dusty, is that right?
Yeah.
Yep. See, there he is, right there. See, we've never met. We've talked on the phone a bunch. So, so we invite what we think are the appropriate people to have an appropriate conversation about who has what can I get from you when I need it. We're working right now on a regional resource sharing document. So if there isn't some good structure already there, some sort of mutual aid agreement, or, fire has a solid one, law enforcement has a really solid one, but some of the other disciplines don't. And so we want to make sure everybody feels like we're working in fairness and not trying to invent something at the last minute, because back to your comment about reimbursement, you can mess that up real easy doing this. And so we're trying to be very careful and get something that FEMA has agreed to and sworn off on. And then come to some agreement about, how many dump trucks do you need? 20. You need operators? Yeah. You need front loaders, skid loaders? Yep. Okay, here's what you're going to get. You're going to get this many from me. You can have them for 2 weeks. And here's what we think that's going to be as far as trying to get reimbursement for it. So, and sometimes we say, no, we're just going to do it. And other times it'll be, no, we think it's fair that we pay for it. We'll get you done. And sometimes you do that just for expediency, just to get the streets cleared. FEMA is now encouraging us by giving us more than the usual reimbursement, the faster we get remanagement done. So they're doing some things to try and make it better for everybody, because they know so many bad things can happen as a result of leaving a lot of debris sitting around, whether it's leaking refrigerant or a bunch of other things. So yeah, absolutely. So it's fairly easy. We're going to work together to make it happen. It'll be better than if we're yelling at each other from across the street. So.
What does ESF, remind me what that stands for?
Emergency support functions. And again, if you go through this, you'll find 1's transportation, 2 communications, 3 is public works, 4 is fire suppression, 5 is emergency management, 6 is mass care, so that's feeding and housing. 7 is finance and accounting. 8 is going to be health, so that's a combination of EMS, hospitals, and public health. 9 is going to be the search and rescue portion of fire, and 10 is going to be the hazardous materials, and that includes, we got train tracks running right down here through town, right? One within this much distance to my house, and we never know what's there, to be honest with you. It's always a guess. I'm working better now with the railroads than I have since I got here, and that's been great.
Can we go back to the org chart, please?
What's that?
Can we go back to the org chart?
Sure. Dig back to that. You might want to make it. Yeah, there you go.
The policy group has the Board of County Commissioners and City Commission. What City Commission?
Anybody's. Yours, Bonner's. Those are the only 2 that we have at the moment.
Okay.
I think that was part of the question asked earlier, just clarification, that if it touches Edwardsville, this emergency, that you have representation, you will be involved.
Absolutely.
Right? Even if it's a county one, you may still play a role, and there will be assignments, maybe positions, you may be consulting. So I think that was part of maybe that the question you had earlier, that there's some assurance here, right?
Yes, sir.
These folks, they're the decision makers, and that's why the question.
Absolutely.
And by our local side, Mr. Webb is the city representative to that EOC.
Right.
I've been there before.
Right.
And what he is allowed to do is contact with the mayor, who's in contact with the council, making decisions from the EOC with everybody else down there. I would say Mr. May supervises what he does, is corrals a bunch of cats. And tries to get everybody focused on the same thing, because you get different biases in there. So it's a very fluid thing, and you're never going to lose that power of Edwardsville, right? Even though it says the planning is by the city or the county commission, or because just the county runs the emergency management. And in most states, and even states that in the emergency management stops at the county level, because that is an appointed position, usually by the governor's director of emergency management. So because the governor's the one that has to sit there, send a declaration of a state level emergency to the president for the president.
Correct.
Did I understand you correctly that basically this structure is throughout at least the Kansas side of the metropolitan area?
Oh, I would say the vast majority of the EM world uses this throughout the country. This is a standard. Like I said, we adopted some things earlier, and through a personal relationship I have with a gentleman who was in charge of what's called the NIMS, or the National Incident Management System. We worked together for a few years to come up with a new version of this, because the way incident command gets used is really intended for the field. It evolved out of firefighting, actually, out in California. And they said, we work together a lot of departments who don't normally work together. We've got to come up with some standardization so that they understood where they're going to be. If you call me and say, I need you to come and work ESF2, I know what that means almost every place I'm never going to go. I don't know exactly all the details, but I know I'm going to be doing communications of some sort. And not communications like to the public. That's ESF 15. I'm talking about communications amongst us. Make sure we have all the tools we need to be communicating. What we really do in the EM world is, I call it the 3 C's: communication, collaboration, and coordination. Never do we say the word control. That's not what we're doing. We're providing an environment for that to take place organically and with some structure, so everybody knows what their role is. Herding cats. He is so right. There's a lot of herding cats, but the cats do good work. And we bring that back to you folks as elected bodies, the senior leadership, and say, here's our issues. Here's the resources we have to address those issues. We probably need more of this. We probably don't need as much of that. We'd suggest that you move this way, but if you've got a better idea, we're all for it. And out of that conversation can come resources we never knew we had. Oh, hey, I know a guy who has a guy who does a guy, and we pull it all together. And they go, great, that'll work. We need another shelter, fine. Here's a building. Here's some people. Here's how we're going to do it. We're going to find ways to stock it with food, bedrolls, whatever it is. So that's what we do. By the way, there is a better version of this org chart in the document as a standalone document. It's much better resolution than what's in the printed version.
Where we started, because there were some typos right there right off the bat.
Okay.
We just need to read it again to make sure that.
Which page are you looking at? You think?
It was where you wrote down the cities.
Oh, page 14. Okay.
It was 1.6.2.3.
Ordered by the south, Bonner Springs to the east, and the west is 435. It's 435. I think that's inverted.
Oh, is it?
Yes.
Okay, we'll fix it. We'll fix it. Oh, we got it. And that's why we bring it, because somebody for sure, I can look at it 20 times and I see what I expect to see and not necessarily what's right. So
I saw some of those. Like the word just doesn't have to be there.
So, I mean, in light of I think Mayor's comments about taking some time to do some reviews, and I know that the chief's going to do some additional reviews on it as well. I mean, we do have a resolution to adopt the plan if the council is in a position that they want to do that, or we could table final action on this item until March 14th. Obviously, if you have any questions for Mr. May right now, that you can ask those, but just kind of lay out what the process seems to be, how it seems to be shaken out at this point.
And if I can offer this, we're under a little bit of pressure from the state to get this back to them with the adoptions done. And I'm in no means rushing you, but I will also tell you that changes like this are not considered substantive. I know they are to you, but as far as a policy decision, this is not a policy changing deal. This is a fix we need to make. We can do those anytime we want. So if you want to proceed with adoption.
Can I ask a question? Has our two chiefs reviewed this with a fine tooth comb?
Part of what this is a document that's existing and growing, and they're actually doing it earlier than it was originally planned.
Correct.
So this, we know our roles, we've seen what's in here. There is some stuff that he says is not substantive. We all know, maybe we feel a little different than that. We want a document that's clean.
Mhm.
No offense, I'm not trying to
Oh, no.
Right,
No,
no.
no, no.
Well, I just, in glancing the red line, there was a lot of stuff taken out. I do these documents a lot.
And a lot of
Red
stuff
line,
got put
final.
back too.
I have no problem.
Yeah.
The red line is
Beneficial.
very beneficial.
Yep.
I would have preferred to have seen this before tonight's meeting,
Sure.
personally. I don't know what I'm going to ask you. I don't know what I don't know
And,
about
and in
this,
that,
so.
and if that's the case and you don't feel comfortable with it, let's save it until later. We'll tell the state they're just gonna have to wait.
That's just my personal opinion to make a decision on something I don't know that's affecting everybody. I'm
Sure.
sorry, I don't.
Well, at the very least, we should be able to define the city.
One part not change the 2008 adoption of the general plan that this is proposing. So some of the red line that you see there, and there's a lot of it, is coming out, put back in. Because you sit there and have to reformat the plan because FEMA doesn't like to do things, doesn't like change, they don't like to change it, just make it. So part of this, and why the push is coming out, is they kind of reformatted part of the plan and added in more of the economic base, more of the community demographics and everything else. Well, when you do that, just like you're changing your code word, go through, copy, or delete it, or to copy it, to move it someplace else, then all of a sudden you open up a full plan, you have a bunch of red lines. And I'm not saying that there's enough justification not to avoid it. Please review it. Just understand the most part of this, all the ESS and everything else, we collectively, and I think you've been there, too, have all sat there and worked through this plan with the county emergency management. Make sure we have the best product that we're putting out there for the county as a whole and for the city of Edwardsville. We are asked every time, do we have any opinion? Do we have an objection? What can we support? What can we not support? So please review it, but also understand that as staff, we feel confident in the plan presented by the committee.
That does make me feel better, but please in the future, if this is accessible, anything for us to review beforehand,
And-
I would just personally like that.
And I will personally invite you to every one of our workshops. We have some people who come to every single one. And it's not because that they just don't have anything better to do, but because they find that in some way, their world gets touched by something in each one of these pieces. And we encourage that. So if you can spend a couple hours once a month for a year, this plan actually started getting revised a year and a half, more than a year and a half. So it's been a while, and that's because while we were in mid-change for some of the changes, they gave us new changes. And then we got backed up even farther. So that's part of, we haven't had any workshops in the last 6-8 months. We've been doing some other things. We never wanted to get together anyway. So because of the COVID, so we just kind of let this mosey on through its path. The state lost 2 of their planners. They didn't have anybody to read these and look at them. The state's seen this, by the way, and signed off on it. Our county has signed off on it. So, and does that mean we won't have changes next week? We will, guarantee it. But we'll keep doing those every month if we have to.
Well,
And
I
they'll
have
be
one more-
published.
One more comment. Did you come out in 18 and do this with us? Okay, I was gonna say, please tell me,
Chief,
I don't remember it.
I think the fire chief presented it to us.
Okay.
We had given the plan a couple weeks prior, and then most of the questions we just had was on the ESFs.
Okay.
At the process, and it was gauged into how much participation we had in the development of the plan. So that's what I'm saying, from the original plan to this one, that part of the core competency has not changed. Probably when we review again next year, will not change a whole lot because the threats don't drastically change overnight. And we keep planning for those high impact events. So like I said, it's just the administrative side of the changes. And a new flow chart, or breaking an ESF into a different flow chart, because the work chart that we give you there, 4 years ago, 10 years ago, well, 10 years ago, it used to look like an ICS flow chart, and it didn't work well for pre-emergency management. So those are just items.
Structure's similar, but the naming nomenclature is different so that we understand who we're talking about.
Very good. Well, it seems like to me, and thank you so much for coming out and presenting this. I feel like that's really beneficial to have
Sure.
you here
Always.
and where we can just ask questions and get some real direct answers, and just to put a face with a name should something hopefully nothing ever comes up, but should something come up, but kind of what I'm feeling from the council is just in general, when we're having a huge packet to sign off on, it's beneficial to have some time ahead of time to review. So we're doing our due diligence and making sure we know what we're signing off on. And so Zach, to be able to do that, would we just need a motion to table this to have time to review it?
Just for me personally, I trust the staff and the people that deal with it every day to have worked out the details to the best advantage of the city. So
Yeah, and I'd like to just comment real briefly before we make a motion, but I've had the privilege of working with Unified Government and Mr. May personally for 15, 18 years, stand-up guy. And I know he's doing everything for the best of his ability with all the resources that he has. He's constantly reaching out to this at the state level, government level, and trying to get resources for all of us involved for the Wyandotte County and even the cities within. So I definitely appreciate, Matt, what you do for us. And I know that we've had this resolution since 2018, and I echo that if our staff, if our chiefs are comfortable with it, and I know that Mr. May, what he does and his staff, I'm just applaud both of you.
One thing our chief said is he would prefer a clean document. And a few of us on the council have requested the desire to review it before adopting it. And I feel like that's a reasonable, and Mr. May even said a couple of weeks would be fine and acceptable. And so if anyone would mind making a motion to table it.
I would like to just say, reiterate what's said here. I remember when it was the ICS. And it was a disaster in 2003 when we had the tornado come through. And if we'd had this plan in place, say, kind of keep following that stuff, because, anyway, this is 10 times better, or maybe 100 times better than it used to. A lot more detail.
It's a constant battle to do that.
Right.
And it's a lot of work, but it's a lot of work by a lot of people, not just my office. It takes all those people showing up every month to help us get it to be right. And I apologize if today wasn't right, but we'll make it.
Make a motion to table the consideration of the 2022 update to the Wyandotte County Emergency Operations Plan and take any necessary actions.
And that would be for our next meeting, which is 14th of March. 14th.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Will the clerk please call roll?
Milan,
Yes.
Shriver,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Adams,
No.
Bishop.
Yes.
All right, item number 8, consider request from Casey Disposal regarding solid waste charges detailed in the 2020 Municipal Waste and Recycling Agreement and take any necessary action.
Are you gonna do an intro on this one? Okay, I'll let, gotta make a few changes here. I would just say as we're making that transition, I know Matt and his group's here, I mean, it really is a living document. I mean, the worst plan is the one that gets done and sits on the shelf for 5 years and then somebody looks at it. I mean, it truly is those kind of plans. It's even like planning and zoning. I mean, we have a comp plan, but every year we go through it, and every time we do a zoning change, we change those things. So it's
I think just policy wise,
yeah.
it would be wise to have those ahead of our meeting to
Oh, I
review.
agree. It was a timing issue.
Yeah,
I
nothing,
didn't have a
everything
chance either. So
else, yeah.
but it just, I mean, it is a bit of a living, breathing document because, I mean, we know what the main hazards are, things like tornadoes and flooding here. I mean, we're not too worried about, landslides or volcanoes, but you still got to put them in there, right? So, but if I'm in Hawaii, those might be really important things to know. The tornadoes probably aren't really big. So it is a document trying to serve broad things. So, thank you.
If we're ready, this next item is regarding Casey Disposal's request to kind of walk us through some potential rate changes to the trash and recycling service. Right now, we've got Matt Gibson from Casey Disposal with us. So just to give you a little bit of a background on the current municipal solid waste and recycling agreement. So we entered into that agreement at the end of 2020 for that contract to start at the beginning of 2021. The contract includes an automatic rate escalator of about 1.5% each year. So this would be the first year that that rate was amended per the stipulations of the contract. Those new rates have been applied for the most recent billing that went out and were part of the rate ordinance that this group considered at the end of last year. So this change is actually in addition to that contractually stipulated change. So if at some point the council is at a position where they would, are comfortable with making any adjustments to the rates, then that would require an addendum to the current agreement as well as an ordinance to that effect if we were going to in turn amend the rates to the residents. But what our rates do with the ordinance that we adopt in December of each year is the rates that the residents are charged for monthly trash and recycling service. The contracted rate in the agreement is in the contract. It's currently $15.92 charged to the city per address. And there's obviously additional charges that we charge to the residents that cover things like our special citywide cleanup events, our curbside bulky item pickups, billing charges, some factor in for some delinquency type things. So that's why that difference exists. But before we get to that point, what I want to do and what I've kind of discussed with Matt is, and he felt it was important to give, and we've enjoyed a pretty good relationship with Casey Disposal. The feedback that we get from the residents is pretty uniformly positive. Their staff is very responsive, especially considering some of the other service providers that we've had in the past. Matt wanted to, as a courtesy, present some of these factors that I touched on in the agenda memo, kind of walk the council through some of those decision points that we're at now and where the market has changed from the point where we adopted the contract to now. So we probably won't be in the position at the end of this discussion to put forth any final action, and we'll have to come back for that final action. But again, Mr. Gibson wanted to extend the courtesy to the council to let you all know, because it's your contract that you all approved. And that way we can also, avoid, what we want to avoid is any kind of open negotiation of rates and contractual stuff. So when we come back, for a potential follow-up action related to this, you all have gotten some of the background items from Casey Disposal, and at that point, Casey Disposal and staff will kind of put some kind of package together for an action at a later date. So did I capture that pretty okay? All right, so I'm gonna turn it over to Matt, and he can kind of walk through this presentation. Yeah.
Good evening. Thank you for listening to me tonight. Zach did a great job touching on exactly why I'm here tonight. I'm Matt Gibson. I'm the CEO of Casey Disposal. Of course, we started servicing the city of Edwardsville, excuse me, been a long day. About a year and a half ago, a little over a year ago. And it's been great. It's our first city contract that we ever got, and we were a little nervous. Didn't know what to expect, and the city's been great taking care of us, walking us through those steps. And since then, we've added a lot of communities. And along the way, we're a young company, 7 years old. And so along the way, of course, you learn as you go. And I think that's part of the hiccup that we're at right now. We experienced something that in 2020 and 2021, we never thought we would experience with the pandemic, and it hit us, our industry, very hard. And so today, I just wanted to show a few numbers of when we signed our contract in December of 2020 to today, the cost difference and where we are. And I'll skip some of this stuff because Zach already touched on a lot of it. And I'll go straight to the bread and butter. I know it might be a little fuzzy and hard to see, but in 2020, if we just look at things as simple as motor oil, we were at $8.15. Now today we're paying $10.71. That's a 31% increase. DEF, you're looking at a 59% increase since that contract was signed. Hydro, that's what we put in our trucks. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with that. That's a 40% increase. Brakes, you just go down the line. The big one is our landfill. The landfill is up almost 51% since we signed that agreement. And so these are costs that we cannot control. And so that's what really hurts us when we are in a contract and we're only able to increase 1.5%, and we run into all these increases that we just cannot control. And so we are asking the council if we could, of course, get into negotiations and see if we can come to some, I guess, some level ground where we can continue to offer our great service and be a staple here in the city of Edwardsville. And if you guys have any questions, if you need, I don't know if we can zoom into that. You can see it. Pretty good. Okay.
Do you have a long-term contract with the landfill, like guaranteed space?
We do. So great question. And we do have a rate lock as well, but
Yeah.
they did the same thing, obviously, with the pandemic and where they at cost wise. They gave us an increase bigger than what was expected.
So you had a rate lock, but they raised your rate above the rate lock.
Yes.
And it's the only landfill in the area.
Unfortunately.
Rate lock doesn't do you much good then.
No, obviously it didn't.
Right.
Zach, this might be a better question for you, but I can't remember what we paid before KC Disposal came on when we had waste management. Do we have any kind of comparison to what it was before?
That per address, that contractor, I'd have to pull the contract, but if memory serves, and I was actually just looking at this at the end of last week. So the rate that we entered into at the beginning of the contract with Casey Disposal was 1.5% less than 1592. And that rate at that point was maybe slightly over what we were currently paying for waste management at the time that contract ended. Now the contract that Waste Management, some of the rates at Waste Management, because they were one of the companies that bid, their rates would have been significantly higher than what we ended up at when that contract ended in 2020. Had they got the award for the continuing contract, that rate would have been significantly higher than what we ended it at 2020. So the rate that we entered into with Casey Disposal was an increase over the rate that we had ended the contract term with Waste Management. Not much, I want to say 1 to 2%. Had we stuck with Waste Management, that rate from them would have been several degrees higher at that point.
Matt, and I know everybody's addressing this. I'm assuming labor is also another area where people have challenges of finding people and the challenges of inflationary push on that.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a given. And so I didn't put that in there as that technically could be a cost maybe that we could control, right? I mean, you can kind of control what you pay your people, so that's why that's not in there. But yes, thank you.
I assumed it was part of it is challenges. It is for us as well. I mean, probably everybody in this room that has a business or worked in business
Absolutely
understands it. So.
And to add to that, parts, just finding simple parts for items is very scarce in this market right now. So if you do find it, you're going to have to pay 2-3x, obviously, what you would have when you could have found it a year and a half ago.
Just the fuel increase alone is astronomical
It is.
compared to where we were last year.
When we did the contract, I mean, one of our comments, maybe mine, about vehicles and your fleet. And of course, as you said, you were a young company, obviously you started off now a fair amount of used equipment, and you have a fleet replacement schedule of new equipment. I mean, how is that going, and how is that getting impacted as far as fleet replacements of 300?
Great question. So we fully executed that. So pretty much any truck you will see is of newer, 2019 or newer. And we're constantly changing that up and adding more. So we're on a trade-in cycle of every 5 years. And that played a huge factor to us still being alive right now with all these increases, because we don't have to go get as many parts because we're running new equipment, right, that is under contract. And so that is our game plan moving forward. We want to have all new vehicles. So less spills on the street, right, of hydro, oil, transmission, all of the above, less breakdowns so that we get the trash and recycling picked up in a timely manner. All of these things played in the factor of us completely revamping the fleet. And so we fully executed that now. We continue to do that in the future.
How many cities do you have a contract with?
This is the only city.
The only city? Okay. How many contracts do you have with?
Great question.
Communities.
It's about 60 or so with different communities,
Okay.
HOAs, and they vary from 33 homes all the way up to 500.
And is this something that you're bringing before all of them?
Yes.
How much of a rate increase are you talking about? Am I missing that somewhere?
This it's not in there. So we are asking around 25% rate increase to cover these costs. Of course, we are going to talk to Zach and look at some deeper numbers and get with him. But that is what we brought to Zach, was a 25% rate increase.
I feel like, I mean, that's significant. In total transparency, Wade's management came before us and asked for a rate increase years ago, and we said, well, what's the point of having a contract
Yes.
if it's no good? If all the cost went down, would you lower the rate? And they said no. And so we're like, well, that's our contract.
The main issue with that was recycling.
Yeah, that was
It was around a recycling issue only. They didn't bring any other cost to the table. And that was, I think we decided that was their problem on how they negotiate that. But you're dealing with some real unavoidable costs. The only way you avoid those is not by not pulling trucks out of the parking lot.
Right.
But as I was saying, when we went into the contract, if we're talking about a 25% increase, that might be worth going, like that might be a rebid. I don't know.
So just to put a little of context to that number as well. So it is about a 25% increase. I think a little bit less actually, maybe about 24 to 25. So it ends up being a per address rate of a little over $19, which would make our rate, somewhere between that 15 to 17% that we would charge to the customers at what it currently is right now. And going back and looking at the original, when we went out for bid in 2020, obviously we got all these rate information from a number of different companies. That $19, let's say $19 price point is not outside of, had that been presented at that time, it would have been within the range of the other responses that we were getting from those companies. So I mentioned Waste Management, when we ended our relationship with them at the end of 2020, and when they submitted for the contract, again, their rate was actually that based on those metrics in 2020 was higher than what this rate, this starting point is that Casey Disposal is presenting. Obviously, we went with Casey Disposal, local company. They provided the best, most affordable rate at that time. The other companies, when they were presenting that information 2 years ago to us, they're in this range that Casey Disposal is now coming back to us now, prior to all these other mitigating factors.
I would say, and I don't have the contract in front of me, so I'm going to speak a little bit. I'm assuming it has this provision, and you might correct me. But typically, contracts like this will have some provision that says this guaranteed is guaranteed. If there are extenuating circumstances, those things, that they have a right or an obligation to come back and ask for basically to reopen and negotiate. It doesn't guarantee anything, but says, hey, when we enter this contract, we all agree to these certain adjustments. And if there's something outside of that, that effectively they have to come back before ultimately the body and say, this is, we're asking to renegotiate and kind of put our numbers up there. And then from here, there'd be a negotiating process. So, I mean, somewhat the decision point is if, no, we're not going to talk to you at all, or we're going to allow for this discussion. It doesn't mean we're approving it. We've already implemented the 1.5 and we're going to implement the 1.5 next year throughout the contract, but that's a contractual obligation that the parties have. It just simply is this because of what's happening. I think there are some, I think we all agree it's a weird economy right now. Is there something there? Is it that amount? I'm not suggesting if that's the right dollar amount. do
Sure.
I think these costs have all gone up? I'm sure they have. Part of the question would be, but, if I've got new trucks and am I buying those pieces, right? I mean, it's true they've gone up, but maybe their company, because they're better at managing their fleet, those costs may not follow exactly that trail. But
Mhm.
I think we have a contract, I'll call them, generally a reopener if we agree that there's some extenuating
Right.
circumstances. But it doesn't mean that at the end of it, we would agree to a contract change, right? I mean,
Well, and I
that-
agree
that
with what
allows for
Councilman
it.
Adams was saying
Yeah.
about the differences in the situations.
Right.
Where this is a lot of inflation and a lot of what's going on, even based in some federal decisions that are being made, that are way out of your hands. And I totally understand that. 25% is quite a jump without doing due diligence and looking at bids and things like that, like right off the bat. Is there anything, like when we're looking at our citywide cleanup in the spring where we're just using dumpsters, is there some offset of price that we might see there, some savings or something that would be help split the difference a little bit?
Probably, and Matt might be able to speak a little bit more to this, but I would imagine that, I mean, that program in and of itself is not the biggest difference maker when it comes to final cost. If we're looking at, trying to find some middle ground there, then quite honestly, we're probably going to be looking at some reduction of services, whether that's every other week recycling.
Well, that's the
Changes to
opposite
that.
of what I'm saying though. Like when we're looking at raising the costs to our customers,
Right. Oh, I see what you're saying.
or can we
okay.
can we get some extra service in return that maybe wouldn't cost you as much in gas money or in labor? And so I'm saying like something to offset the raise in rates to our citizens.
And those are some of the, Matt and I have talked about some of those different options as well to,
Okay.
if there's a way to meet in the middle, control those and offer, and in some way offer an increased amount of service in some area, then those are kind of the options on the table. And that's what we wanted. I think that's what Matt wanted to introduce was the circumstances. So that way in 2 weeks, when we come back and have sussed this out and are able to present a full package of, here's, after going back and forth between the two parties, here's a per address rate that we're comfortable in at least bringing up to you. Not to say that it's one that we would recommend to take, but between the negotiations, here's a rate that we've landed on for a possible change. It also comes with these other aspects touching on some of the items that you brought up.
Matt, can you give us when you do that, can you give us an idea of going to what the savings would be going to every other week recycling?
Yeah, we can definitely bring that to you.
Michael, if we do this, if we agree to this, is our share 1870, is it the total amount or is it just their share?
The 1870 is what we charge.
No, but are we gonna raise that too?
Well, obviously if the rates, well, I would say this, I mean, because that fund is pretty much a pass-through fund, so we don't have a big reserve there. Now, we've over time held a rate or we've stepped them in. But I mean, let's just assume the rate was $19. Obviously, we would have to increase that. Now, how much above that you want to do, that's kind of the policy decision, right? So again, as an example, we have costs to produce the bills and send them and collect those things, right? Do you say, well, that's fine, but we're going to pay for that out of just the general fund and we're not going to get reimbursed for those kind of costs? That's a policy decision. It's not the first one I would recommend, but is that something that allows maybe a transitional period of time, right? Where normally we pay those costs from the garbage fund or from the solid waste fund, right? We literally transfer money from the solid waste to general to pay for those costs. Maybe we don't do those and that would impact with the final rate to the customer. So to some respect, two different things. What they're going to charge us is the contractual thing. What we ultimately charge to the customer is a policy decision that we generally set during the budget process. But I would say if you have a significant increase, you're probably going to have an increase in the rate to the final customer because otherwise,
Increases
yeah.
270
Right,
on top of the initial charge to cover fees
right.
that the city incurs, so.
But I can tell you over time when we had, I won't say exactly, but similar situation, where one year, I mean, we used to, of course, we've added things. We used to build about $1 per customer for the billing component, right? That covered the postage and the, the mailing and all that. It was about, at the time when we first started doing it, was about $1, right? That didn't include the special pickups. And we had a year where, quite honestly, we were trying to keep the budget and follow the mill levies on, it was a struggling, one of the down years. And we said, you know what, we're instead of collecting $1, we're going to collect 50 cents. And I'm just using numbers. I don't think these actual. And we kind of took a little bit of a hit in that. And quite honestly, we used to have a little more healthy reserve in the solid waste fund, but we let it kind of go down because again, the solid waste fund really, for the most part, is an in and out. We need enough balance in there so we don't get into, which we did a few years ago, where you get into a audit violation because billing's coming in at a different time than, we're paying before we bill, right? I mean, they're sending us a monthly bill and we're sending bills every 2 months. So we're always kind of, the collections behind the charges. So, and we got into a little problem. I mean, it was an audit violation. I mean, it wasn't in the world, but so those discussions, I would say, would be separate to some respects. I think we have to take into consideration during the negotiation. If this is what you're going to charge us, what do we think as staff needs to be charged to the ultimate customer to pay for those costs and keep the fund healthy financially? Right? That's I don't think we're in a position to answer that quite yet. So, but it will have to come into consideration.
Mike, have we got any delinquencies on that? I mean,
We do. Zach's better up to date on what our billing delinquencies, and we've been doing some programs to try to.
Right. So we do have ever since we made the switch from a quarterly billing to a bi-monthly billing, and that was in 2018, that delinquency rate has gone up. And quite honestly, a lot of it is, a lot of folks are still,
prices are going up and you can't afford it.
well, it's not so much the prices are going up and they can't afford it. It's that what we've seen is, well, I don't, to the city manager's earlier point about money coming in at the same rate that we need to have it going out to pay our contractors. Previously, there was a good chunk of people who just did not pay their trash bill when they got their bill, and they just let it become especially assessed to their taxes. Now, the problem with that is, we get our money 16 months after we ended up having to pay for it. So that was one of the reasons why that our reserves in the solid waste fund kept kind of trickling lower and lower because we were not receiving the money for the service until property tax statements were due. People communicating that change was a pretty lengthy process. I mean, people were still under the impression, well, trash used to be free in the city of Edwardsville when it was always just assessed their property taxes. But there was always that issue of charges going out that we weren't collecting, revenue for to pay the contractors who were doing that work. So we do have a delinquency rate. I'd probably say it's around that 10%. Now, what we've done to help mitigate that is transition to some of our, if you've not made a utility payment in 2 billing cycles, which is 4 months, then we give you all the notices that we've got the authority to send you to a third-party collection agency, and we've started doing that now with the accounts that have been closed and have worked, sent out information to people who it seems like you haven't made any payments in a number of months. Here you run the risk of being sent to collections. Contact us with some payment. We could work out a payment plan or something like that. We don't want to penalize people if they just really do not have the ability to pay. We want to work with people. So if we're not saying you have to be completely caught up before to avoid being sent to collections, but you need to be demonstrating that you're making some good faith effort to pay those bills when they come in. And the reason being is just letting accounts go delinquent for a year and waiting for them to be assessed to the taxes, that the timelines just don't work when we have bills that we need to pay our contractors every month. We can't wait 16 months for that money to come in to reimburse the kitty.
I will say some cities, I can't think how many, what they do on their garbage, and I mean, again, this was a policy system years ago, you can always reassess it, but so some cities, what they do on the taxes, they do a special assessment per house for the a year's worth of solid waste. So if it costs $300 a year, it's on their tax bill. When they pay their taxes, they got to pay that. I personally have never been a big fan of that method. I mean, the positive is you probably have higher payment rates, but I think it generates other issues that, that aren't as positive. And I mean, it is a service. I mean, we wouldn't expect to go to, I mean, drive through McDonald's and order our meal and then get to the window and go, what do you mean I have to pay for it? I just want to eat it, right? I mean, garbage is another service. I mean, I know none of us like it, but it's a service and it's a necessity. And we have to have a way to ensure that it's being collected, taken to a proper landfill site, disposed of, and but getting paid for it. And it's an ongoing challenge. You have the same thing with water and sewer and electric and all your other utilities. You get some group that just feels like, I don't know why I should have to pay for it. I pay taxes. Why do I have to pay for these services? Because it's I mean, in my entire career, that I don't know how many times I've heard that discussion, but a lot of times, right? But it's got to be a competitive service. I mean, these guys, I mean, they're here to do a service and make a profit, right? And they're not doing this as a charity. They got to make a profit, and we have the obligation, though, to ensure that we have a service that's reasonable, most efficient, and set a good price for our citizens, right? I mean, we can set the service level. I mean, right? If we decide we only want to go to, every other week on recycling, or quite honestly, some places go recycling is more important than the garbage. Those are all policy decisions that we can always make. But anyways, other questions for us or for?
And we're gonna look at big trash pickup, that extra big trash deal that we put in there.
Pretty much everything on the table.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
Most affordable rate, we want to present.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, we wouldn't get to a point where, as I said, we have really enjoyed the relationship that we've had with Casey Disposal. I think the residents have really enjoyed the relationship that they have with Casey Disposal. This is kind of the setting the table so staff can try and find a package that is as digestible as we can get it. I mean, no one's going to like it, but it's kind of the work of the staff and Casey Disposal to try and figure out, well, how do we get there with them remaining solvent and seeing if we can salvage the contract and our relationship with them.
And the feedback that I've gotten from the community is they generally really like Casey Disposal in comparison to the service we've received before. And so that's been fantastic. What I'm saying though is when we're looking at increased rates, if there's anything that we can do to improve the service so we can say, hey, at least we're offsetting this a little bit here. And when we're looking at it and we're coming back to it, what I wouldn't mind seeing is if prices do go down, because hopefully some of the a lot of these are driven by fuel costs. And so if the fuel cost does go down in 2023, are we looking at pulling back to where we were before and maybe including a recheck there in that when we're looking at the final numbers here?
Well, if you want to respond to that.
Yeah, and so I guess it's kind of to your question earlier as well about waste management, right? About they came to the board and they asked, or the council, excuse me, and asked, hey, can we get a rate increase for one commodity recycling? And so if it was one of these things, I wouldn't be up here today, right? Because I could find that cost somewhere else in another community or something else. We can figure that out. It's across the whole board. So that's the issue that we have. If fuel goes down, what about everything else, right? I mean, if everything else stays the same, then the answer is probably no. Could we come back to the original price? Probably not. If it was one item that we're talking that we see these substantial increases, then yes, the answer would be yes, we could do that. So that's the issue that we're running into right now. That's why I'm up here today. It's not just one, it's through the whole market, the whole industry. that we're seeing these increases.
I was gonna say some, and I'll throw these out, right? I mean, we'll get them, but I mean, just some tactics, and I mean that in a positive way, right? So there could be some indexing, right? We didn't use I mean, I know a lot of people use consumer price index, but yeah, I mean, set that aside, but there could be some indexing of some of these types of things, whether it's fuel and labor and things that is used to see how that market is fluctuating in that specific business. Because sometimes the problem with consumer price index, it's such a broad basket that you could have one over here that they're down here and somebody's up here and it's a middle ground. So I've seen that in contracts for services like that, whether it's some agreed to indexing that triggers increases, decreases, right? We can look at, so they may be saying, and we need this amount of money, right, to these costs, but we're a little worried, well, what if those costs come down? Well, so maybe those increases are triggered over some more period of time, right? So it's like, okay, today we're going to give you X. 6 months from now, we're going to look at these indexes. If it's hit these things, yes or no, then we'll give you additional or not. I mean, so I think there's some things in the broader negotiations that we can work in to help lessen the impact to the final customer in one day. I mean, I think that's the concern, right? Is my bill was this, and all of a sudden it's going to cost me $4 a month more, and that on top of I'm paying more for gas and I'm paying more for this, and it's just one more thing, it just overloads them.
Mhm.
I think that we can certainly have some discussions about options of how that is phased in, which then might allow us to say, okay, the first increase is an increase that we get from the contractor, but we're not going to increase our rate with that increase. Again, it's all about everything. But then in 6 months, maybe we don't get an increase from them, but now we go up, $1 or so. So we can step our increases to not necessarily eliminate it, but lessen the impact of the burden in one fell swoop. And again, those are kind of two different buckets. The one's what we got to pay, and one's which really where we have more control is how that impacts our customers, right? Our resident, because this is all about residential customers, right? And so
That would be helpful in the presentation.
right. Yeah. I mean, I think there's things like that we can look at. We haven't had any chance to really sit down. Again, I think, and I haven't really had a chance to talk to Matt with this. It's like, this is hitting us. And I don't think we're surprised. I mean, I don't think anybody should be surprised. I mean, I filled my pickup truck up with gas and, instead of 2 digits, it's pushing 3, right? And I certainly didn't expect that, or the RV, I don't see it taking any summer trips right at the moment, right? But I can control that. That's something I can control.
Also, just kind of anecdotally, so the county is having, they're coming to the end of their review of their countywide, what they call countywide solid waste plan, which is essentially the Bonner Springs is part of that agreement in the city of KCK. So they will, I don't want to speak to how the policymakers are going to carry through some of those plans, but by and large, the changes to that they hired a consultant to kind of walk through their system. By and large, what their consultants told them as far as a level of service item and a landfill management and reduction of landfill and that kind of thing, their recommendation from their consultants was, and I'm paraphrasing, you should replicate Edwardsville's model, the weekly recycling, eliminate kind of the unlimited bulk and yard waste that they've currently got over on KCK. So those are the recommendations that they're looking at right now. Obviously, they're working with their contracted partner, Waste Management. And to your point, I don't think there's a lot of appetite from the residents to go back to Waste Management at this point. So all that to say, at a broader kind of regional level, they're Bonner Springs and more specifically the UG are kind of tackling some of these too. But from what the service looks like, Edwardsville's kind of the model in Wyandotte County of how what the service looks like from the end user, from a landfill management standpoint, and from a just general quality of service type level. So I'll say that kind of broadly. We've been pretty proud of when we have those meetings with the solid waste committee at the UG. look at the reduction that Edwardsville has done by initiating a weekly recycling program, and it's not cluttering up the landfill with all these other different type of things. I'll say that
One thing I
anecdotally.
think our community appreciates as well compared to Kansas City, Kansas is the closed lid recycling containers. So we don't
Yeah.
have trash flying all over the place.
Right.
That I don't understand why anybody would do that, but it's very helpful. Like I said, I think we have had really positive relationship with Casey Disposal, especially compared to our relationships before. And so hopefully we can work it out. I feel like it's the consensus of the council, and correct me if I'm wrong, to bring us back some information.
Oh, yeah. We're not, we don't have materials ready to, or a package ready to present to you at this point. Again, Matt, this was brought up to us. We've been having kind of some preliminary discussions on what that rate would look like, but from a relationship standpoint between the city and Casey Disposal, we definitely wanted to set the table so you guys are kind of aware of some of these mitigating factors and costs that they're experiencing. So when we come back, you've got a little bit more context as far as where it's coming from. And we also have, from a timing perspective, our bills just went out. So the next round of bills won't go out for another 2 months. So we're not going to initiate a mid-billing period rate increase and have to resend out all these bills. So from a resident standpoint, they're not going to experience any interruption in that, for at least that period. So we've got, obviously, Casey Disposal wants to move forward and get some clarity on what that rate is going to be, and so do we. But we do have a little bit of time from a billing perspective to kind of hash it out and see how it's going to shake out for the end user.
Nate, I know. Anyway, hey, when you bring it back, I don't want to see percentages.
Right.
I want to see dollars and cents.
Right.
Well, yeah, then that'll be, because it'll have to be spelled out that way because it's an addendum to the contract.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
And thanks for coming tonight. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, we have the city manager report. Mike, do you have anything for us?
Yeah, just two things besides what you have on there. Number one, I somewhat mentioned this earlier to some of y'all, but we have submitted what's known as the BASE grant, which is Building a Stronger Economy. This is a state, it's federal funds, ARPA funds, came to the state. The state put out basically this grant opportunity. It was due today for $100 million. We submitted a grant that would request about $3.1 million in funds for infrastructure improvements to do kind of open up some of our commercial area down around Wood End and 435 that it's vacant for many, many years. There is a 25% match, but most all of the match is being supported by private development, who have said that if the $3 million comes along, they're going to put up about $1 million of it. We have a small amount, about $80,000 in there. So that's kind of, which probably we have funds available. It's really around the sewer. So hopefully that, I think we made a good application, but you can bet when somebody says there's $100 million sitting out there that everybody is applying, and it wasn't limited to cities, those kind of jurisdictions. I mean, it was open to chambers and lots of them. I mean, I heard 8 or 9 coming out of the kind of Kansas City, Kansas area, not from the city, not from the county. I mean, they may have them too, but they were from all kinds of different organizations. So the good thing is they at least said initially that they were going to have that answer out in 2 weeks after the close of the application. I don't believe it. I mean, I think they're going to have so many applications, it's just going to take them more time. But they're, again, they're under the same guidelines. They got to spend those money. So they want to have so if somebody's accepted, they'll send out the first half of the money around May of this year, and the second half about a year later, something in that same range, kind of how they've done others. So we're in the bucket with everybody, so hopefully get there. And from your request for having a workshop and dates, it sounds to me, at least the feedback I've got, you may have had others, that the 26th is probably the preferred date related to the council. I mean, so more people seem to find, I mean, I know there's not a perfect date. We have firmed it up. Hollis Center was not available, but I did reach out to Councilman Scott about using, they have a nice little kind of a conference room facility there at the Speedway offices, right there on the other side that we've done meetings at before. I think that would make for a nice, event place for us to do. We'd kind of be away from the normal environment, and we would, again, I think roughly at 8 to 4. I mean, I know we'll have it set out, but we would, have food in the morning, and I've already been working with staff on how we would present, and then kind of a lunch break, and then maybe a few more things, and kind of end the day with really just probably the council and myself kind of as a final group, just to kind of meet together in that environment and go from there. So we didn't have a chance to speak. I apologize, but if those were the two dates we're looking at, the 5th and the 26th. Obviously, the 5th is this weekend, and right, yes, and we have chamber meeting on Friday, dinner. If anybody wants to go that hasn't signed up, let us know. Right. So it looks like the 26th is the preferred date.
Okay.
I'm going to give Dusty a potential out, just so you know, because he is in baby waiting mode, I guess. He'll have a new child here sometime, probably before that date, but we'll make sure to handle it as necessary. So.
All right. Zach, did you have anything to add?
Just a reminder about if you're not, let us know if you want to attend the chamber dinner at the end of this week, if you've not already let me.
All right. Dusty, did you have anything for us tonight? Chief Whittam?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you again for allowing us to have responsible colors. On Monday, funeral service will take place. There will be mutual aid companies that can cover the station at the city while we were with Johnson County paying our respects.
Thank you. Chief Matthews? Stehan?
I do not.
Councilman Adams?
Nothing, thank you.
Councilman Bishop?
Yes, I would like to, the Avery Hotchkiss Memorial Education Fund is up and, I understand, correct? And that money is going to go to help teach our. Okay. Well, don't run off. I got a check for you right here. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Councilman Malott?
I'd like to give my thanks to Michelle Parker to accept to serve on the CCPS board. Hard to get volunteers in Edwardsville, and I think it's great that people are stepping up for those positions. And I'd also like to mention on the loss of the firefighter, whatever you say, I feel really bad about it. And also I'd like to mention that Bonner Springs lost John Claxton too, who was the EMS director. Retired, but he was EMS director up there for years. That's all I have.
Thank you. Councilman Shriver?
I would like to thank Michelle Parker as well for stepping up and serving on the CPPS board, because as Councilman Member Malott said, it is hard to find the volunteers. Granted, we know people are busy, schedules don't work out, but we meet once a month. And for these Edwardsville citizens to step up and be on the boards, it's just giving back to your community, no better way. Chief Whittam, thank you so much for you and all the fire department, all the other departments, whoever was involved in getting the Avery Hotchkiss Memorial Education Fund put together, because no better way to keep the memory going and remember this young soul that passed away. So kudos to all of you. And thank you for all going Monday too. What an honor. I'm excited to see maybe with Casey Disposal, what Councilmember Adams said, what it would look like doing the every other week recycle. Might be a big difference. I don't know. think about the fuel and everything. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Councilman Scott?
I just want to thank Dusty and his crew for all their hard work for the snowstorm. I think it says here 13 hours. Sure seems like it was longer than that. I know you guys I heard him out on the street behind my house early in the morning. So definitely appreciate you doing that and all the extra hours. And again, and Chief, I'm sorry for your loss. And I applaud your efforts too, in representing Edwardsville. And I definitely appreciate that. Thank you.
Just a quick reminder for folks, we have our next Edwardsville Mobile Pantry coming up in a little under 2 weeks. So if you know any community members or people that even live in the area that are in need, there will be opportunities to sign up on our Facebook page, on the city Facebook page, and I believe on the website, yes, on the website as well, and that will provide them free groceries. They just need to sign up in advance, please. Chief Whittem, if there's anything we can do as a city, please reach out and let us know. We are adjourned.